Hi everyone. So in the previous few videos, we have seen how we can use Flask security, Flask RESTful for our backend things. And now we'll combine whatever we have learned in the previous few videos, and we'll see what all we can do for that. Okay. So in this particular video, what we will do is we will create a login and register APIs. Along with that, we will also create few CRUD APIs, probably on one of the models. As you can see on the screen now, we have this is the structure of the model which we would be working with. So we have a user model, role model, and the secondary table. We have already understood that why we are following this particular architecture to implement role-based access control. And the second thing is the product model, where we will be performing some CRUD operations. So that's the idea and application. So let's start with the application now. And this is a boilerplate for the application which we have written. We have imported Flask request and JSONify over here, and a simple initialization of app has been done inside a function right now. And we have initialized this application, we are running up. That's the major thing which we have done. The second thing, if you see over here, which you might not have seen or you don't know before, that is we are importing Flask chorus. What does it say is that we are using chorus stands for cross origin resource sharing. So generally in Mat2 project, we generally host we have two servers. One is for the backend and another is for the front end. And so these backend servers and the front end servers both may have a different IP address. So to communicate between these two and allow resource sharing among these two servers, that's why we enable chorus. Chorus stands for chorus resource origin, cross origin resource sharing. So that's what we are also enabling in this particular application, just to give an quicker ahead on what is why we are doing this chorus. And this is the boilerplate which you will be working with. And so let's start initially. Since we are building up from the whatever we have learned, we will be first creating our models. And right now in this particular video, I would be following a modular approach towards the configuration of my application, so that when you start working on your backend, right, you also follow that similar practices, and you know how to implement everything. So let's create a new file. We'll call the file as config.py. This is we'll be defining a class which says that config, and here we will define all our configurations which we used to set. For example, secret key, password security salt, which was needed for Flask security, or SQLI SQL database URI and all. So all those configurations we would be setting up here. SQL database URI, this thing, and also see a secret key, and also we need security password salt. These few configurations we have set in the previous videos as well. You might be familiar with all these configurations, but this time what we have done is we have put in all these configurations inside a class called as config, and we will be importing all whatever configurations which we need to set for our application. We would be using this config.py file, and we'll define over here. And let's save this file, and from our app.py file, what we can do now is from the file which we have defined, config, we will import that particular class. Then also we have given the same name as the file name for the class as well. So we are importing config from there. And then we generally used to say in the previous videos how we have defined our configurations was like this, that we used to specify as an key to the app config, and then that's how we were defining the configurations. But right now what we can do is we can simply say app.config config dot from object, because that's an object of the class config, right? And we'll pass the config here. This is the config which we have imported and has been defined into this particular file, which is class config over here. So we have set up the configurations now. Okay, and now also we would be working with the Flask security and the Flask RESTful. So let's create these in order to avoid the circular errors in our application. When you will start working and with this modularization, you will know that what a circular error comes. But for now, try to avoiding the circular error. What I'm trying to do is I'm creating a new file where I would be storing the instance of the SQL Alchemy class. So I'm calling that as an database.py. So what I will do is here from Flask SQL Alchemy, I'll import SQL Alchemy, and I'll say okay that I will define my SQL Alchemy over here. So this is the next thing which I have done. Also, and where I've defined my app.py file over here, right? You can see I've specified my configurations now. I will now initialize. First, let's import the DB, the object which we have created from database import DB. So what we have done now is, so if you see here in a database.py file, we have created an object of SQL Alchemy class, and that's what I'm importing over here from the database import DB. And now what I can do is I can say db.init app, and we'll tell okay I'm working from in the context of this particular app. Yeah, this has been also taken care now. We have now similarly we need the user data store. When we were discussing the Flask security and we were setting that how we can configure our Flask security in our application, we saw that we need Flask SQL Alchemy user data store, which we have seen and we have used that. Basically we call that as a user data store, and we were using user data store to add various fields into our tables and all, right? Similarly we will do that. So what we do is let's create a new file, and this would be user data store. And so this is the user data store. What we are trying to do over here is from Flask security security, we will import SQL Alchemy user data store, and and we will just user okay user data store is equals to SQL Alchemy user data store, yeah, store. Yeah, and this was the object. But we know that when we are passing this particular object, by getting the object, we need access to the DB, the models, user model and the role model. So but we right now just have the DB which we can import into our user data store file. So from database we can import DB. That's how we can pass DB as an argument here, right? And but we also need two models, user model and the role model. So let's go and create a new file over here which stores all our models. So we'll call that as a models.py file, and from database import DB. And what we will do now is we'll create our required models. So class user db.model. What all we need ID, so db dot column db dot integer and primary key. We need username is equals to db dot column db dot string. Email, we need password. We have also seen that we need active, and we also need fs token unifier. So we need to create this fs token unifier and fs unifier. These are the two fields which we needed because Flask security was asking us to have these two fields into our models, so we have included that. And after these two fields, and now we can also define relationship between our we'll define that after we have defined the model for roles. And similarly we can define a secondary table, which we have already seen, but I'm just, for the sake of completeness, I'm repeating this. Yep. So we have defined these three models, which you have already seen also, that we need to define this, but let's also define the relationship between the user table and the roles table via the secondary table, which is user roles. So we can go here and say roles is equals to db dot relationships, and this is relationship is defined between the roles class over here via the user roles, and we are setting up the backref. Yeah, this is done. I think let's also check the model which we have created. We have all the fields which we needed. Let's for now we'll ignore the address in our user model, because it's very similar to what we are adding various fields. So we need email ID, password and all. So let's go to the models.py file now. We have user email, password, and these three fields are responsible. We are putting these three fields because we need to implement the Flask security, and we have defined the roles table. Similarly, let's also add one more model, which is for the products, and we'll also inherit this from the model. For the people who understand this, right, you can skip this particular part, but just for the sake of completeness, I'm writing all this again. Yes, I'm not putting all the fields. I'm just putting, for the sake of completeness, I'm putting name, description, price, and this is the stock for the product table, because I want to perform the CRUD on this product table. And with the APIs, authentication APIs, I want to perform the CRUD on the user table and the roles table. So with this, we have our models ready. Let's save this particular file, and we'll come back to the user data store now. So if you see here, we needed, objective was where we were, right, when we were defining this user data store, we needed model in the roles, and when we started with this particular files, right, we didn't had the user and the role. So what we need to do is, we will, from our models.py file, we can import user, and I think it's the users and roles, if I'm correct. Let me check the spellings as well. So it's user and roles, user and roles, and we'll correct the spellings errors over here. So we need this user roles table, and we can specify these user, and also we can specify the roles here. Yeah, and so with this, we have created our user data store object, which we can use when we are setting up our application. So we'll come back to our application and start configuring our app a bit better. So what we need to do is, we will import from user data store file, which we have defined over here. We can import the user data store object, and we will say also, since we have from using the security, right, so now we can say security is equals to security, and we'll tell okay, I want the security on this particular app, and with this user data store. Yeah, and I don't even need to assign this to a particular variable because I'm not going to use this. So let's define this app. So we have defined the user store, we have defined the security, and that's the configuration which we wanted to do has been done. Since we are going to use APIs into our application, so we need to import. And for the creating APIs, we have seen two approaches. So one is simply by following the routes approach, and the second was using the Flask RESTful. So in this particular video, we would be using Flask RESTful. So from Flask RESTful, we will import API, and we will also configure our API is equals to API, and we'll tell okay, I'm working in this apps context. Yeah, and when I'm returning things over here, I need to when I'm trying to add the resources right in my application, I need this particular API variable. So I would just get the API from here. So this thing we have done clearly. We have set up our application, and also making changes over here. And now the initial setup for our application is almost ready, and we have configured our user data store, we have configured our models, we have configured the database objects, as well as all the configurations have been set in properly. And now what we will do, also let's define a function over here, and one more function which we will define over here, just to pre-populate some of the fields which we have done before. So what we will call that function as, let's initialize db, and what we will say with app context, what all we want to do, we want to first create all the databases. So we'll say create all, and also we need to add few elements into a database. So when we are trying to add few elements, we have used user data store. It's very similar to what we have done previously. So I'll be very quick in doing that. So first of all, I need to add the roles. So I'll add admin role is equals to user data store, store dot find or create role, and we can pass all the fields which we needed. So if you see in our models we have two fields which we want to pass. One is a name, another is a description. So in our app, when we're doing this, we are passing name and description, and we are using user data store to create the roles. And similarly, let's find a user first. So let's say that I want to find an admin user. So I can say user data store dot find user, and I can check with the username. And what I can say that if this admin is not there, I want to create an admin, so I can say user data store dot create user, and I need all these fields which I need. I will say that username is admin, I need email, and let me get the fields name properly, email and password. And password. Also we need to define the roles. So let's just add both the roles to this particular user. Yep, with this we have added this user now, and we can simply say db.session.commit, and this will add all, this will reflect all these changes which we have made into our database. So that's the that's the assumption that by now we have done added the fields into a database, and this is by up till this particular point whatever we have done is being done in the previous few videos. It's just that we have now followed a modular approach on how we can put different components of our application to different files, because this will help, you know, ease our programming as and when our application grows faster. We know we can manage our files very better and easily, right? So that's the reason behind why we have done this approach and why we have taken this approach. And now so when we are doing this, we can call this what was the function name which we have created? initdb. Yes, and so now let's save the file and see if we encounter any errors, and if errors comes, we'll correct that. And let's run python app.py file. We have virtual environment activated and we are running this particular application in our virtual environment. So we see that our application has been started without any errors. Also, a folder has been created called as an instance. So let's go and check the database once, how this looks like, and to ensure that the data which we wanted to add has been populated there or not. So it's taking some time. Yeah, so let's go to the user table. We have the admin which we wanted to add, and also we have these fs unifier and fs token unifier being populated correctly. And if we go to the user role table, we have both the roles for same admin role and user role. Both the user rules are there for the admin. So I think the data has been entered correctly, right? So our application also run without any errors. So we have done everything which was needed for our application to work. The initial setup was there. So now after all this, right, we will start creating our authentication APIs. And so you all already know that we would be using Flask RESTful. We have seen an example of creating Flask RESTful APIs, and so let's go and start with it. So let's create a new file over here, and in the file which we would be creating, let's name them as auth apis.py. And so this is the file which is responsible for who's holding all the logic responsible for authentication APIs. So basically we would be creating 3 APIs here for the authentication. One would be for login, other would be the logout, and similarly register, right? So we will be following the Flask RESTful. We would be using Flask RESTful for that. So you can imagine that. So in this particular file will be containing 3 classes. So let's start with the login first. So from Flask security, or sorry, Flask RESTful, I need to import a resource, and yeah, for now I just need to import the resource, and I can create a class. Let's say that the class name is login user, and I will get the resource. I'm inheriting this, and whenever I'm creating an login resource, I want the user to send a post request for me. So I can say define post self, and this would be having this would have the data. So let's get the data. So login credentials is equals to, and we need to use request. So let's import from Flask, import request and JSONify, right? So what we will do, request dot get JSON. We have got the request and we have got the data, and let's first perform the validation. If not login cred, if this thing is empty, or if it does not have username, or it does not have a password. That is that I want to ensure that the request which I am getting should have the username as well as the password, and if this all these three checks are passed, then only we will implement other logics. But if this doesn't, if this any of the fields which is missing, we'll say that I am returning a message. So I'm using JSONify to format. Okay, let's create the result is equals to, and we can say we'll send the message saying that username and passwords are required, and yeah, and then we will return JSONify and we'll return the result, and we will also say 400 error. Now we know that we have received the data which we have received from our API has the username, also has the password. So now we can just say username is equals to, we'll get the username from the, and also we'll get the password. If you want to perform any other data validations in our API, all the data validation which you want to perform in the API, for example, let's say that the first which I want to ensure is the username which I have got is an existing user in my database. So that's the one check which I wanted to do, and in order to do that I need to use the user data store. So from user data store I will import the user data store, because I want to ensure that the username which I am getting over here is a valid and existing user in my database. So let's call a user data store and then we can say that dot find user, and we'll pass the username. We'll set this value to a user, yeah, and if this user is not there, we want to send a result, or right now let's put this into a single line. Yeah, now after all this we'll check the password. If user data store dot verify password, we'll check for the passwords if passwords are correct or not, and if the passwords are not correct, we can return saying that your password you have entered is incorrect. So by now what all we have done, we have performed some data validations, and once all the data validations which you want to perform in our application or the API, we can generate the authentication token. Authentication token is equals to user data store store dot get auth token, and also what we will do is from the Flask security, we will import a library called as utils, and we can say utils dot login user. Yeah, we'll call this particular function, and this ensures that user has been logged in successfully, and we can say that we can pass the message saying user has been logged in successfully, and we can also set the user details. User is equals to, or let's say we need to pass the authentication token, so we will say authentication token as authentication, and also we'll send the user details, and then we can return the result. So this is how we have implemented the login endpoint. So let's have a quick look at what we have implemented. So every API which we send to which a user sends may have a body, and the body when we are implementing this login user functionality, every time when user hits this particular API, he needs to send username and the password as in form of body. So that's what we have implemented. So the body which we have received over here, we get the data from there, and we are storing that into a login credentials. So we are performing some sort of data validations now. First data validation which we do is to ensure that whatever body is not empty, all the body which is there, it should contain the username and password. So if we have these two things, then we move ahead. Otherwise we'll return by saying that user and passwords are required to the user, and that's the result which would be sent to the user back. Otherwise if username and passwords are there, we collect the username and password from the from there, and we perform we check whether the user is existing or not using a user data store. So we have defined user data store, we have been using user data store, and you have seen how the usage of user data store happens in the previous video, where we dealt with Flask security, where we set up the Flask security, right? So this is where this thing goes, and if we don't find the user, we return with some message with some status code as well. And similarly, after all the data validation has been ensured, password has been checked, everything is okay, then we can get the authentication token from the user data store by using get auth token. And then once we get the authentication token, we can use utils library to tell our server that this user has been logged in. So it can maintain a session within itself, and once all this is done, then we can return particular data which you can see over here. This we have customized to ourselves to ensure that what email ID user has, what's the username. We don't need the ID, so we can remove the ID. We just need these three fields, so we can do that. And also along with this request, we are sending this authentication token. So that's how we have implemented our login API. So let's save this particular file and see if are there any errors. So first of all, what we need to do the next step is to add this endpoint to this particular resource. So we'll go to our app.py file. We'll go to the app.py file, and at this particular point over here, we can start importing from auth APIs. I need to import login user, the class which I just created. Yeah. And once that has been created, I will add resource. So I will call API. So this particular API variable which we have defined over here, API.add resource, and we can say this is the API which I'm gonna address to this particular login. So we'll save this file, and let's go and test if everything is working fine or not. So we can use Thunder client as an extension to make this request. So let's do that. Let me copy the URL from here. Yep, /API/login. I think that's the endpoint which we have defined over here. You can see, so this is the endpoint which has been associated to the user login. So yeah, and we need to send the body. In the body we should have a username, and we need to put double cut, not single one, and let's call it as an admin, and also the password as admin, and we'll send. I have entered a wrong password over here, and I'm sending this request, and it says that the method is not allowed because we wanted to send a post request and not the get request. Let's send it, and we got some internal server errors. So if we scroll down over here, it says that it has no verify password. I think I have made a mistake when I'm creating this API. Instead of using user data store, I should use utils. Utils dot, okay, let me correct it properly, utils dot verify password. Yeah, now save the file again, and we'll come back over here and we'll test it again. That error has gone, so you can see that the error which was coming before has gone, vanished, but we got something of that object is not serializable. Let's look at this error. Let's try to enter the correct password and hit particular API. If we send that particular API, we receive that this get authentication token is not an attribute in the SQL welcome user data store. So if we go to the auth APIs, here we have defined user data store. Instead of user, this should be user. So user dot get auth token, and this should be user. Yeah, and once this is taken care, so we are getting the authentication token from the user. And let me tell you where this particular function is coming from. So if we go where we have defined our models, we have made a mistake over here, and if we go over here in our models, we have just implemented db.model. Also we have to import, so if you have seen in the previous videos, we have to, from Flask security, we have to import user mixins and role mixins, and then we will add user mixin as well as the role mixin over here. Yes. So now these functions, right, you see the function which you see over here, this get auth token is a function which has been defined in this particular class which we have used over here, which is user mixin. So that's why it's saying that this get authentication token is not an attribute, because the user class which we wanted to import should be should also inherit user mixins, the function which have been defined in this particular class, which is user mixins. In the previous video we have seen this as well. So let's save this file, and also let's save this particular file, and now we'll test if things are working for us or not. So let's go over here and try to send the request, and we got another error now. So the error which was responsible for our this thing, right, the get auth token, has been resolved. The only error which is remaining is because of this the dictionary which we are defining over here, and because it says that the objects which we are returning are not JSON serializable. Let's try to debug this. Okay, what we will do, from the Flask we are defining, we can also import make response. So we have in order to overcome that error of we are using make response, and we'll return the JSONify, and we'll also return 200. Let's save the file and run our application, and let's test this. And we have successfully logged in. We have gotten 200 error, and also we have got the authentication token. So you can see over here that we have got the authentication token which we can use in our further application. Also you have also got the admin details with what's its email ID, what's the role, and what's username. So we have successfully created an API. So the errors, okay, let's give a summary of what has happened, what all errors were coming, how we have resolved that. Okay, so if you see over here, when we are returning these as an object, right, it is saying that the JSON is not serializable. The reason is in order to avoid that, what we can do is, like we have done over here, we can instead of this particular thing, let's comment this, and what we can do is we can say I want to return return. I will be using make response. So this is the thing which we have imported from the Flask. You can see on the top that we have imported make response from the Flask, and now we can create a response by creating JSONify as an invalid password and also sending the status code as followed for. If we do this, the error which was coming, right, JSON object not serializable, it will go away. That has been taken care by that. And yep, we can do it over here also. Let's comment this out, and we can make a response saying that user not found. and similarly over here make response. And we'll save the file. And now let's try to test what happens if we were entering a wrong password, and when we send a request we get invalid password and if we enter the correct password we also get the authentication token. If I don't pass the password, what output I get? It says that failed to decode the JSON object. The JSON should not have a comma, so we send it and we say that username and passwords are required. So we are getting 400 error as well. So if we enter the password, again we are able to log in. So we are able to create the login endpoint over here now. Just to give a quick recap, so what we are doing, errors were coming, but overall we have taken care of all those errors, and if some similar errors come to you in your application, you know how to debug that now. So after this, let's create a logout endpoint as well. So we can say that class logout user, the resource which we are creating is logout user now. And so we have used so a user can be logged out only when we have his or her login credentials, or whether user has already logged in. So for that, in order to log out a user, I need his authentication token. So for that, what we can do is there is this from the Flask security, we can import our auth token required, because that will ensure that every API you are trying to hit, it should have an authentication token in your header. So what we can say, @auth token required, yeah, and then we can define post self, and since the user, we are getting invalid credentials, we just have to ensure that we say that utils dot logout user. We will use this particular function to log out our user, and we can just result out saying that you have successfully logged out, and we can send the response by saying that using the make response we can result in a 200 status. So by this we can ensure that we are logged out. Let's try to also add, now after creating this particular API, the post API which we have created over here, we'll go to the app.py file, we'll add the resource here. So I need logout user, and I can add API resource for this as well. Yes, and after this thing we can test the API. This is for the logout. Okay, before that let me copy this particular authentication token, because I need to when I'm doing a logout, I need this authentication token. That's what we mean when we say auth token is required. So when I go over here, I click on the login, and I get the authentication token. Now if I hit the logout API without passing the authentication token, it says that 404 endpoint is not found. I have not saved the file, so let's save the files. All the files will save, and now again we'll go and test. Have I made any spelling mistakes over here? Let's come over here, let's paste, and yeah, post request only. Let's check what method we have defined over here. We have defined a post method only, so we are sending the post method. All files have been saved, and now let's send. I want to try it again. Yes, no, I think probably the file was not saved, and that's why we were saying that the method was the endpoint was not found. But after saving the file and running the test, this particular test again, it says that you need to sign in to view this particular resource. We never defined this particular kind of an output, but if you see over here, we have used this particular function over here if it says that auth token is required. So if you say now how do I pass this authentication token and where do I pass this authentication token? I don't need to pass this into my body, but I need to pass into the headers over here. And one of the headers, you see that we are already sending 2 headers. We'll also send another header which says that authentication token, and the authentication, if you remember, I have copied an authentication token. I'll paste. Okay, I have to get the authentication token again. So for now we'll hide this. Let's go to the login and get the authentication token by sending the correct credentials. This is the authentication token. Let's copy this authentication token, come to the headers, and we'll put the authentication token over here. When I'm sending the logout request, I need to sending a post request, and I will also include the authentication token that, and when I send it, and now you can see that I have successfully logged out. So this is how we have implemented 2 APIs right now. One is in logout API, and previously we have created the login user API. So we have implemented login, we have implemented logout. We are left with 2 more things where we are performing the CRUD on the products, and the next thing is implementing the register functionalities, or to allow normal users to being able to register via an API. So we'll see these two things in the next video. We'll stop here. Let's also divide this particular video also into 2 parts. See you in the next video. Bye. Have a nice day.